Tonight on NewsWatch, religious liberty threatened. Catholics sound off about President Obama's assault on their faith.
Plus, the world pauses to remember the Holocaust, why many Israelis fear it could happen again.
And religious freedom on campus. Christian student groups fight back against Vanderbilt University. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Catholics say religious liberty here in the U.S. is under attack. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lee Webb.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. A major Catholic leader warned today American Christians are facing an assault by the most secularist administration in the nation's history. Catholics from around the country gathered today in Washington for an annual prayer breakfast. Religious liberty topped the agenda. Much of the focus was on President Obama's new contraception mandate. Paul Strand was at the event and starts tonight's coverage.
More than 800 believers gathered at the 8th Annual National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, but they felt a shadow hovering over them, as defined by main speaker Carl Anderson.
Never in the lifetime of any of us here present has the religious liberty of the American people been as threatened as it is today.
He says the Obama administration realizes it's at war with pro-life forces, even if pro-lifers don't want to face it.
Last year, the Secretary of Health and Human Services told a NARAL luncheon, "We are in a war."
Such as forcing Catholic institutions to provide services that include abortion-inducing drugs. Anderson said believers will soon have to follow the example of Martin Luther King in disobeying laws they find immoral.
He cited St. Augustine, that an unjust law is no law at all.
The right to believe is absolute. The right to act on those beliefs do have some limits.
Secularists like Kelly Damerow believe it's religious institutions discriminating, like against their own employees, who may disagree about contraception or abortion.
For the contraception mandate, we believe that religious organizations should not get specific exemptions to discriminate on the basis of their religious beliefs.
Anderson insists exemptions are incredibly narrow for this mandate. For instance, for a Catholic institution to be exempt, it could only serve fellow Catholics, not the general public. Jesus wouldn't even qualify.
So in a country where 3/4 of the population professes to be Christian, the administration insists upon a religious exception that Christ himself cannot meet.
Anderson told CBN News the administration is trying to force believers to tolerate what they once wouldn't.
When you have a government that's willing to do that, you have a government that's willing to manipulate and change the identity of churches. And that's exactly what the First Amendment was designed to prevent.
Anderson warned his audience this is the most secularist administration in American history. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
People around the world pause to honor and remember the 6 million Jews who were killed during the Holocaust. Members of Congress gathered on Capitol Hill today to pay tribute. Since 1982, lawmakers, national leaders, and Holocaust survivors have met in the Capitol for days of remembrance. It's part of a week-long national event established in 1980 as a memorial to Holocaust victims. Never again. That's what survivors of the Holocaust have said.
Absolutely. But now many Israelis fear that another Holocaust could happen. Jews are worried about the rising international tide of anti-Semitism. Julie Stahl reports tonight from Jerusalem.
Less than 70 years ago, a veil of secrecy fell, revealing the shocking horrors of the Holocaust. The images seared our minds, and the world vowed never again.
If you live in a world in which the leader, both religious and political, openly speak about destroying the state of Israel, I think there's a good reason to fear another Holocaust.
With that thought, Israelis paused for 2 minutes to honor the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. A recent opinion poll here found some 40% of Israelis believe the Holocaust could happen again, and 43% are concerned Israel could be destroyed. Nazi hunter Dr. Ephraim Zuroff blames the rise of both traditional and new forms of anti-Semitism.
Incidents, efforts to delegitimize Israel, unfair criticism of Israel, attacks on Jews, and this is something that is very widespread.
Frightening examples include this recent scene in France where a Taliban-trained terrorist gunned down a teacher, 2 of his children, and an 8-year-old girl at a Jewish school. And in Hungary, a parliamentarian recalled a 130-year-old case. That's where Jews were accused and then acquitted of murdering a Christian girl to use her blood in the Passover holiday. Experts say anti-Semitism is also changing.
One of the most important and most dangerous transformations has been to change the focus of the hate from the individual Jew or the Jewish community, local Jewish community, to the state of Israel.
If you sit together in an evening dinner with some friends in Europe or United States or Northern America, it's much more politically correct to say bloody Israelis, but you mean the bloody Jews.
Anti-Semitism expert Dr. Rafael Vago is the son of Holocaust survivors.
They are transferring the traditional hatred towards the Jews in trying to destabilize or to delegitimize, rather, the state of Israel today.
Even worse is its presence in the political arena. During a Remembrance Day ceremony, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the Iranian regime was working openly to destroy the people of Israel. Zuroff says the West needs to stand up and prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb because its leaders won't stop with Israel.
The Jews are always the first victims, but never the last victims. So in other words, by fighting against anti-Semitism, you're not only helping the Jewish people, you're helping yourselves.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
India successfully launched a missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead into China. That missile has a range of 3,100 miles. It's capable of hitting Beijing and Shanghai. The missile can carry multiple warheads or launch satellites into orbit. India's leaders say it's the first major step to becoming a world power. China already has ballistic missiles capable of hitting anywhere in India. The two countries fought a war in 1962 and still have a border dispute.
A series of explosions rocked Baghdad and 4 northern cities today in Iraq. More than 30 people are dead, about 100 wounded. About half the attacks targeted security forces and government officials. Most occurred in Shiite neighborhoods. Those residents suffered the greatest casualties. No one has claimed responsibility, but officials say the attacks fit the pattern of al-Qaeda.
We are learning new details tonight about that Secret Service prostitution scandal in Colombia. For the first time, a woman who was with the agents is speaking out. So far, 3 Secret Service members have lost their jobs, and more dismissals could be on the way. Mark Martin reports.
The Secret Service is known for its dedication and professionalism, but the unfolding scandal involving Colombian prostitutes has given the agency a black eye. The New York Times interviewed a woman claiming she was the escort who partied with the Americans. She told the newspaper they never told her they were with President Obama and were very discreet. Congress is demanding answers.
Well, I do think that what has gone on is very embarrassing. And I think it's clear there are investigations going on both at the Pentagon and at the Secret Service. And I hope they get to the bottom of it quickly.
The Secret Service says 1 agent has resigned, 1 has retired, and 1 has been proposed for firing with cause. In addition, the Pentagon says it's investigating 10 or more service members from all 4 branches of the military who may also have been involved. While there are concerns the scandal put national security at risk, officials say there is no indication the women involved were spies or obtained classified information.
There is nothing thus far that's been revealed. The investigation will take place and we'll be able to know, but nothing so far.
Retired Secret Service agent Dave Wilkinson served 3 presidents. He says there is 0 tolerance for personal misconduct.
The real thing that concerned me this week is to hear all these questions about the culture of the Secret Service changing in some way. What? I mean, no, there's no the culture is that won't be tolerated. Every single agent knows it.
Meanwhile, a Senate Judiciary Committee will put Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano in the hot seat. Senator Chuck Grassley says if heads don't roll in these circumstances, then behaviors won't change. Mark Martin, CBN News.
The House of Representatives passed a highway bill that requires the building of the Keystone Pipeline. President Obama has threatened to veto such a measure. 69 Democrats voted, along with the Republican majority, in favor of the bill. The vote is likely to keep the pipeline issue alive until the November election. Members from the House and Senate will soon meet to discuss details of the bill.
Mitt Romney will give this year's commencement address at Liberty University. A campaign official tells CBN News that Liberty welcomed the former Massachusetts governor, and he gladly accepted. Graduation will be May 12th in Lynchburg, Virginia. Liberty University is the nation's largest evangelical Christian college with more than 80,000 students enrolled, most of them online. This will be Romney's first appearance at Liberty.
Details about America's youngest eligible voters and their faith are coming into focus. They're called the Millennial Generation. And as CBN's Jennifer Wishon explains, they're not your grandmother's generation.
Wendy, indeed, they are not. We're talking about America's 18 to 24-year-olds. The Public Religious Research Institute and the Berkeley Center for Religion at Georgetown University recently conducted a survey of 2,000 millennials, and it found major religious shifts. All Christian groups saw millennials leaving their ranks, Catholics seeing the biggest drop of nearly 8%. The group that's had the biggest increase is religiously unaffiliated. Nearly 14% of millennials have left the religious traditions of their childhoods to become unaffiliated. It's now nearly 25% of how millennials describe themselves.
Millennials are much less likely to say they have a personal belief in God, like someone who you can have a relationship with. They're more likely than older generations to say that God is a more impersonal force in the universe.
The survey shows millennials have strong ties with their parents, with most of them talking to their parents at least once a day. But millennial Christians have a more liberal view of the Bible than perhaps their parents.
They're much less likely than Americans as a whole to have a literal approach to the Bible, to say the Bible is the literal Word of God and be taken literally word for word, and much more likely to say that the Bible should be, it should be open to interpretation.
When asked to compare their generation to that of their parents, 40% of millennials had negative things to say, describing themselves as lazier, less moral, and more selfish. Now, the big question, of course, this year is how will millennials impact the presidential race? Nearly 60% of them have never voted in a presidential election before. And the answer is that it's really too soon to tell. And Wendy will learn more about their political thoughts this fall when the same millennials are surveyed by the same group. Again, by then, we're hoping that more millennials will be tuned into the race and have more to say.
Yeah, it'd be great to know how they're going to vote in November. Well, I know you'll come back when you have that information. Jennifer, thanks. Very interesting.
Coming up, political correctness run amok at Vanderbilt. How Christian groups there are taking steps to fight a controversial new policy.
If you're an individual group or business needing a dental plan, Avia Dental offers group plans for as little as $5 per month. Now members of your group can save up to 50% or more off a high-quality dental care. Everyone qualifies, and there's no waiting or limits on visits to the dentist. Visit aviadental.com or call 1-888-431-CARE. Avia Dental since 1994. Smile, you're with people who care.
Believe it or not, this is a catheter. It's the new SpeediCath Compact for women. Now available from Liberator Medical with full Medicare and private insurance reimbursement. Stay tuned for an exciting free offer. But first, meet Julie.
You know when you leave the house and you say, okay, I have my phone, I have my keys, I have my wallet, I'm good to go? Now I always have to think of a catheter because I can't go without it. SpeediCath came into my life and it is life-changing. They're tiny and thin and you can fit them in your back pocket. You can fit them anywhere you need them. This is a lipstick or lip gloss and this is the size of it. With this, you're only touching the outer plastic and you're never actually in contact with the catheter itself. You just really have to give a sample. That's all it needs is one sample and everyone's gonna want them.
Now, here's that free offer I promised. Call Liberator Medical. Get your free SpeediCath Compact sample 6-pack. Shipping is free. 1-800-595-1446. 1-800-595-1446.
If you're an individual group or business needing a dental plan, Avia Dental offers group plans for as little as $5 per month. Now members of your group can save up to 50% or more off a high-quality dental care. Everyone qualifies, and there's no waiting or limits on visits to the dentist. Visit aviadental.com or call 1-888-431-CARE. Avia Dental since 1994. Smile, you're with people who care.
Tensions over religious freedom are rising at Vanderbilt University in Nashville.
Christian student groups opposed to the school's new non-discrimination policy are appealing to Vanderbilt's trustees. They're hoping they will overturn what the school calls its all-comers policy. Heather Sells reports.
In our Constitution, it says that we have the freedom to practice religion. And here at Vanderbilt, I just don't feel like that's necessarily the case.
On Wednesday, Christian students handed out 4,000 copies of this video to fellow students on campus. They're also hosting a lunch for school trustees, and on Friday, they hope they'll overturn the school policy.
The goal is to really try to get those board members to hear our side of the issue. And then hopefully if they hear that, they'll be willing to make some changes to the policy so that we'll be allowed to be here.
The policy requires all student groups, including faith-based ones, to allow any student to seek leadership in a campus organization. That means students who disagree with an organization's beliefs could apply for leadership in the group. So theoretically, an atheist could lead a Christian Bible study group or Christian fraternity.
For the course of this year, we've been able to be on what they call deferred status. And so they've told us that we can function as normal groups for this year, but that our registration for next year is being called into question. And so that means that we wouldn't be able to reserve space on campus. We wouldn't be able to have access to events where we kind of advertise who our organizations are at the beginning of the year.
This week, a university spokesman told the school newspaper that this debate isn't about religious freedom. It's about non-discrimination, and we believe those principles are not in conflict.
At least 11 religious groups say they may have to meet off campus next year and forgo other privileges like using Vanderbilt's name and receiving student funding. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Tennessee lawmakers take steps to protect the religious speech rights of students. The state Senate there unanimously passed a bill to prevent discrimination against students expressing their religious beliefs. The bill requires school districts to treat student religious speech the same as it would secular speech. Students would also have access to school facilities to organize student prayer groups and religious gatherings.
Up next, he planned to blow up the U.S. Capitol, but the media never mentioned he was a Muslim. A look at this alarming trend of political correctness.
If you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, call now for a new pain-free meter. These new meters are more accurate, they're easier to use, and the best news is you don't have to prick your fingers anymore. Call now, and Arriva Medical will send you one of these new meters for free. And if you have Medicare, your testing supplies may also be covered. Arriva makes it simple. They bill Medicare directly. There are no upfront costs. And they deliver your supplies right to your door for free. With these new meters, there's no coding, you don't have to prick your fingers, and some of these meters even talk.
Your blood glucose reading is 122.
And if you call 1-800-284-9762, we will send you a free Betty Crocker Diabetes Cookbook filled with delicious recipes.
Call Arriva today. You'd be glad you did.
Believe it or not, this is a catheter. It's the new SpeediCath Compact for women. Now available from Liberator Medical with full Medicare and private insurance reimbursement. Stay tuned for an exciting free offer. But first, meet Julie.
You know when you leave the house and you say, okay, I have my phone, I have my keys, I have my wallet, I'm good to go? Now I always have to think of a catheter because I can't go without it. SpeediCath came into my life and it is life-changing. They're tiny and thin and you can fit them in your back pocket. You can fit them anywhere you need them. This is a lipstick or lip gloss and this is the size of it. With this, you're only touching the outer plastic and you're never actually in contact with the catheter itself. You just really have to give a sample. That's all it needs is one sample and everyone's going to want them.
Now, here's that free offer I promised. Call Liberator Medical. Get your free SpeediCath Compact Sample 6-pack. Shipping is free. 1-800-595-1446. 1-800-595-1446.
Well, the first rule of warfare is to know your enemy. But in the war on terror, the U.S. refuses to use terms like jihadist or radical Islamist to describe the terrorists who threaten the U.S.
Some in the media argue that the war doesn't even exist. It's part of an alarming trend of political correctness. Eric Stackelbeck has the story in tonight's Focus Report.
When FBI agents arrested Amin el-Khalifi for plotting to blow up the U.S. Capitol, most media reports identified him as simply a Moroccan man. Entire news reports about el-Khalifi's case made no mention of the fact that he was Muslim. Neither did a top Justice Department official who labeled the al-Qaeda admirer a homegrown violent extremist. Again, no mention of Islam, even though el-Khalifi had prayed at a Washington area mosque just moments before driving a van he thought was packed with explosives to the Capitol.
He was obviously affiliated with the Islamic Jihad, and what's very clear is that had he succeeded, the coverage would have been different. But wouldn't it be better if we had media coverage that talked about the potential of what could happen so we could prevent it?
Minnesota Representative Michelle Bachmann told CBN News political correctness takes over in mainstream reporting on Islamic terrorism.
The world is being turned upside down because of radical Islam, and our media is refusing to tell the story. They come from a decidedly leftist worldview and a secular, almost an anti-secular in a way, because they've embraced such a radical worldview and they impose that filter through every subject they touch.
Depending on who and what you read, the war against Islamic jihadists is already history. The day after U.S. forces killed Osama bin Laden, CNN terrorism analyst Peter Bergen declared that the war on terror was over. The New Republic's Peter Beinart agreed, saying it was time to lay that war to rest.
Unfortunately, our best and our brightest have become our worst and our dimmest.
Author Michael Widlansky's new book, Battle for Our Minds, argues that the American people are being misled about the Islamic terror threat.
I'm talking about our public intellectuals, the people who are the gatekeepers to our minds, our media, our academics, and our government intelligence people.
He says these groups have created a climate where legitimate criticism of Islamist ideology is branded as bigoted.
Our problem isn't Islamophobia. It's not a phobia. It's not an unreasoning fear. It's Islamophilia, an unreasoning love of Islam and protection of Islam. And even worse, Islamyopia, a nearsightedness and a willful ignorance when it comes to things Islamic.
The problem existed through the Clinton and Bush administrations, Widlansky says, but has reached new heights under President Obama. The Department of Homeland Security has replaced phrases like radical Islam and Islamic terrorism with vague terms like violent extremism and man-made disasters. And after a Muslim terrorist shouting Allahu Akbar gunned down 13 U.S. soldiers at Fort Hood, a Pentagon report described the massacre as workplace violence. Then there is the president's top counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan. He's referred to Jerusalem by its Arabic name, Al-Quds, and has called jihad a spiritual struggle and legitimate tenet of Islam.
The basic meaning of jihad in Arabic, from the Arabic root jahada, third form, is war, physical war.
So how did the politically correct stance on Islamic jihad take root among our leaders and opinion shapers? According to Widlansky, much of it can be traced back to one Palestinian professor whose reach extended far beyond the classroom. Edward Said was a former advisor to Yasser Arafat. During a trip to southern Lebanon, Said was photographed throwing stones at Israeli soldiers stationed on the border. Yet these radical activities did not stop him from becoming a celebrity professor at Columbia University, thanks to his book, Orientalism.
Said's basic idea was that the West had raped the Islamic East. He wanted the West to get dumb, and he succeeded. And the next two generations of American students, diplomats, future CIA agents, know little or no Arabic, little or no Islamic culture.
He says Said's portrayal of the West as aggressor and the Muslim world as victim had huge influence on college campuses and in the mainstream media. It also became popular at the State Department and in the intelligence community. President Obama, who was then a state senator, even shared a table with Said at a 1998 Arab community event in Chicago.
You can see and feel the Said message in many of the things that Obama says.
Widlansky says the Said view has done great damage to American interests, but that it's not irreversible.
The average American understands in his gut, in her gut, what's going on. They pick up the hints. Let's start educating our law enforcement, our security officials, the next generation of American students to understand the Middle East, to understand terrorism. We can beat this thing Israel has beaten it. The United States can beat it. The world can beat it. We have to beat it.
Eric Stackelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
If you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, call now for a new pain-free meter. These new meters are more accurate, they're easier to use, and the best news is you don't have to prick your fingers anymore. Call now, and Arriva Medical will send you one of these new meters for free. And if you have Medicare, your testing supplies may also be covered. Arriva makes it simple. They bill Medicare directly. There are no upfront costs. And they deliver your supplies right to your door for free. With these new meters, there's no coding, you don't have to prick your fingers, and some of these meters even talk.
Your blood glucose reading is 122.
And if you call 1-800-284-9762, we will send you a free Betty Crocker Diabetes Cookbook filled with delicious recipes.
Call Arriva today. You'd be glad you did.
Believe it or not, this is a catheter. It's the new SpeedyCath Compact for women. Now available from Liberator Medical with full Medicare and private insurance reimbursement. Stay tuned for an exciting free offer. But first, meet Julie.
You know when you leave the house and you say, okay, I have my phone, I have my keys, I have my wallet, I'm good to go? Now I always have to think of a catheter because I can't go without it. SpeedyCath came into my life and it is life-changing. They're tiny and thin and you can fit them in your back pocket. You can fit them anywhere you need them. This is a lipstick or lip gloss and this is the size of it. With this, you're only touching the outer plastic and you're never actually in contact with the catheter itself. You just really have to give a sample. That's all it needs is one sample and everyone's gonna want them.
Now, here's that free offer I promised. Call Liberator Medical. Get your free SpeedyCath Compact sample 6-pack. Shipping is free. 1-800-595-1446. 1-800-595-1446.
Well, years before there was MTV or VH1, there was American Bandstand.
And today, America mourns the loss of the father of music television, Dick Clark.
Live from Philadelphia, it's time for America's favorite dance party.
Fans spanning generations left flowers and memorabilia in Times Square in Philadelphia and Hollywood. Clark is known for launching hundreds of stars, bridging the racial gap, and more recently, counting down the New Year's at Times Square.
Please greet for their first visit, the Jackson 5.
And is she hot? This is Madonna.
You send me.
I have great memories of Dick Clark. We grew up every Saturday, 1 o'clock, watching Dick Clark.
He was one of a kind, and he will forever be young in my heart. I love them.
Yeah, the entertainment icon died yesterday of a heart attack at the age of 82. That's the American Bandstand I remember. I was coming of age in the late 50s and early 60s. And I really would kind of, make sure that I was home so I could watch it on Saturday afternoon.
We all did. It was just part of it. It's like, wasn't it just like more wholesome back then? It seemed like, the music and the dancing, and wish we could go back to that.
And he was a terrific broadcaster. He was very comfortable on camera, and he knew how to make the viewer feel comfortable.
Really, really was one of a kind, and he will be missed. Well, thanks for watching. That's going to do it for us.
Good night.